Alright, hello. Welcome back to Half-Life 2. We're going to be continuing where we left off with developer commentary. Let's get right into it. Okay, I'm trying to remember where I left off.
Rendering systems. In the early 2000s, we couldn't afford a general-purpose renderer with the broad capabilities of a modern engine. Instead, CPU, GPU, and memory limitations required highly specific solutions to rendering challenges so we could squeeze every bit of performance out of a player's hardware. As a result, Half-Life 2 actually has 3 different rendering engines. One for world geometry, another for outdoor terrain, and a third for dynamic entities like characters and objects. These 3 renderers had to support a complicated matrix of features: collisions, ray traces, decals, offline lighting, visibility calculations, and more. On top of that, each renderer needed to support DirectX 7, 8, and 9. The differences among these DirectX versions were significant, often requiring different data storage and rendering approaches. They even used different programming languages. Altogether, we essentially had 9 different renderers, each needing unique solutions, and getting them all to look consistent was one of the most challenging tech problems we faced during development.
Wow. DirectX 7. What the fuck is that? Don't have the gravity gun yet. If I go in there and read that, I'll be invincible, so fuck it.
GPU Wild West. During development, we faced numerous decisions influenced by our choice of minimum spec, the least powerful CPU and GPU combination that would still deliver a good experience for customers. In the early 2000s, there was far more variety among GPUs than today, with wide differences not only in speed, but in fundamental approaches to rendering. But at the time, we had no real data on the hardware our customers were using. What CPUs and GPUs did they have? How much RAM? Which version of Windows? We reached out to Microsoft hoping they might know answers to questions like, how many DX7 cards are in use? Or DX8? Unfortunately, they didn't have the data either. Realizing we were at risk of making bad decisions without these insights, we developed an analysis tool that allowed players to report their hardware specs to us and integrated it into the early version of Steam. The data was so useful that we decided to make it public, launching the Steam Hardware Survey in April 2003. It's been helping us, and hopefully other developers, make informed decisions ever since.
I can't help myself.
They're shelling us!
Holy fuck.
To tell the story of how they're used by the Combine. The story is that the Combine have weaponized Zen fauna to use them against the humans. burrowed headcrabs was added as a new feature for this section that was expanded into a larger area that is meant to show a citizen shanty that was decimated by the headcrab assault.
It's like the only zombie I've seen that's not a zombine. Or a white shirt zombie, excuse me. A white shirt zombie guy.
Airboat intro. This is where the player gets the first vehicle of the game, the airboat. We wanted to create a safe space for players to practice driving the airboat for as long as they wanted before moving on. The arena is sprinkled with opportunities for jumps and tricks, and we filled the arena with toxic slime to keep players in the airboat longer, while preventing them from leaving the vehicle behind and progressing forward on foot.
Climb on in. Fire her up. Go ahead and get in the boat, Dr. Freeman.
Shut up.
Combinatorial shader explosion. Rendering became much more complex during Half-Life 2's development with the addition of hardware shaders, small bits of code controlling how each pixel on a surface should render. In 2003, shaders were far more limited than today. This meant no if-else branching logic to adjust based on different conditions, and no large shaders with broad feature sets. Also, compiling shaders as needed was just too slow to be useful, so we had to pre-compile them. To work within these limits, we had to compute every possible shader combination and store each one individually as its own shader. For example, if a shader affected a surface based on a single light source, we'd need another shader version for 2 lights, another for 3, and so on. And it was combinatorial. If that shader also supported a normal map, we'd need 2 versions per light, one with a normal map and one without. With features like texture blending, vertex tinting, specular highlights, alpha testing, and various other light types, directional point and spotlights, our shader count exploded. By release, we had thousands of individual shaders. Shortly after, we released Lost Coast adding HDR support, which doubled the shader count again. Once compiling shaders on the local developer's machine started taking too long, we switched to distributing the shader compiles over the entire network using VMPI. We also had a dynamic shader compilation mode that was useful for developing shaders that gave fast turnaround at the expense of frame rate hitching when a shader had to be compiled.
Fighting motion sickness. In early playtesting, many players developed motion sickness while driving the airboat. While trying to fix this, we discovered several factors that contributed to it. We found that reducing the as well, so it was important to keep an eye on performance in these sections. However, the single most important factor was eliminating view roll to maintain a more stable horizon no matter what the airboat was doing. One of the programmers on the team was super prone to motion sickness, and they valiantly offered to playtest several times to test our progress towards a solution. I'm pretty sure they threw up at least once after playtesting, and their noble sacrifice was hugely appreciated.
should have just jumped out and took a dive, you know what I mean?
Airboat time. Finding the right balance between vehicle time and time on foot took some work. Driving at full speed propelled players through the world quickly, and in early playtests we felt that players were missing out on exploring and taking in the game's detail. Exploration and world examination are core values of Half-Life, so we didn't want the vehicle to eliminate that. To address this, we added periodic spots where players could get out and explore small pockets of dense detail. Additionally, as the physics system evolved, we were learning new ways to use it. These spots off the airboat let us introduce an element of discovery around physics, like dropping crates into the water or combining barrels to raise a ramp. This gave players a chance to interact with water and physics in different ways.
Floating supplies. In the alpha playtest, the canals were sprinkled with floating supply crates that players could smash with the airboat to collect the supplies inside. The mechanics were somewhat gamey, but helped keep the flow of the gameplay going, allowing the player to resupply on the go. To help make the premise more plausible, we wanted to tell the story of how the floating crates ended up so conveniently placed along the player's path. This scene of the citizens dropping supply crates helped sell that fiction, while also making the canals feel more alive. It also made players feel more heroic and important to be helped by so many supporting characters.
Zombie surprise. There's a little bit of a cheeky jump scare in this sewer pipe. Players wander in here, all focused and curious playtesters. One fell completely out of their chair, and we mark that moment as a success.
Oh shit, I'm supposed to go up there. Alrighty, Gordon. I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, it is.
Grenade intro. We conceived of this Combine base as both a training area and a playground for grenades, introducing them here in infinite supply crates to signal that it's safe for players to use grenades freely without fear of running out. Go wild. The Combine encounter here uses
Go
extensive
wild.
markup to direct the soldier AI towards cover and provide good opportunities for players to make use of grenades. At the end of the area, the same infinite grenade technique helps players resolve the turret placement, as a direct assault is a lot more difficult if you don't. A bright red light and a particle trail were added to the grenades, making it significantly easier for players to follow their trajectory, whether they're throwing them or dodging one from a Combine soldier.
Air resistance. One important feature we had to add to our physics engine for Half-Life 2 was air resistance. At the time, physics engines would typically implement a general damping feature for slowing objects down as they move. But this merely removes energy in a symmetric way. In order to create more believable motion, we decided to simulate air resistance instead. This allowed us to get asymmetric behavior, where the amount the object was slowed by moving through the air was different depending on how much surface area of the object was facing the direction of movement or rotation. This feature was key to making explosions and objects thrown by the gravity gun look believable. Fast-moving and fast-spinning objects are among the most expensive things to simulate in Half-Life 2's physics engine, so air resistance also improves CPU performance in cases like explosions. It is also key to presenting different materials and masses of objects. More dense objects can push aside air more easily, and this is visible. Having this effect in the simulation helps make the difference in density between cardboard boxes and wooden planks.
Puzzle layers. Because players are often totally unaware of the designer's intent, which we think is a good thing, they tend to respond in all kinds of surprising ways to our puzzles. Even seemingly simple puzzles can see countless failures along the way to success. That was the case with this puzzle to open the canal gates, which required many layers of hints and cues. The sparking wheel communicates that this is where someone would normally open the gate, but some other method is needed. A few crows draw the player's eye towards the solution, in this case, a bundle of girders on a pendulum. As grenades have been thoroughly introduced, we originally wanted players to throw one to break the wooden support structure, but that wasn't obvious enough. We added exploding barrels as a much clearer clue. But even after solving the puzzle, some players didn't realize that the gates were now open, which led them to endlessly explore the base interior looking for another exit. So we had to remind them of their original problem, the broken gate. We added smoke, the alarm klaxon, and a spinning light, and it was then that we finally started seeing reliably good results in playtesting.
Metrocop strafing. The initial design of the airboat levels aimed to challenge players with tight maneuvers under pressure from Metrocops. The Metrocop strafing fire pattern was meant to make players slalom around the shots as they sped through, but in a review process, internally known as Overwatch, some playtesters felt frustrated being shot at without a way to retaliate. They wanted the airboat to feel powerful and unstoppable. Based on that feedback, we refocused the levels to emphasize empowerment over challenge, shifting from dodging attacks to fast-paced combat, speed, and busting through barriers.
No shit. Oh man. So much for empowerment, though. Got one health.
Skybox. We've always needed to render a world that feels larger than our map limitations allow. In Half-Life 1, we used a cube map texture to let players see beyond the playable area. But in Half-Life 2, we wanted that view into the larger world to be dynamic, not just a static texture. Our map size limitation was about half a mile in each dimension, but we realized we could create a much larger outer world if we stored it at a reduced scale. So, we invented what we called the 3D Skybox. The 3D Skybox is a small box hidden within the actual game map containing geometry at 1/16th scale. Inside it, a reference point corresponds to a matching origin in the main map. Then, when we render the space beyond the playable area, we use the geometry from the 3D Skybox, positioned by that reference point and scaled up 16 times. Getting the lighting and fog to blend seamlessly across the transition from the main map to the Skybox presented some sticky challenges, but it worked. The result made the world feel significantly larger and more immersive than it had in Half-Life 1.
.357 Intro. The Magnum, unlike the basic handgun with its slower rate of fire, is meant to be fired in a more measured, calculated way, dealing catastrophic damage to your target. Earlier versions of the Magnum had a bit of random dispersion, which we felt fit the heft and the less sensitive trigger pull of a larger pistol. However, this led to anticlimactic moments where players would carefully line up a shot only to miss due to the accuracy penalty. To address this, we made the first bullet perfectly accurate, with each subsequent shot becoming less accurate as you blasted away.
VMPI. During development, we became increasingly frustrated with our slow gameplay iteration speeds, mainly because map compilation, needed to pre-compute lighting and visibility, was taking hours. Computers in 2000 were far slower than today's, and they had only a single CPU core each. Inspired by SETI at Home, a distributed program that used PCs worldwide to analyze radio waves for signs of extraterrestrial life, we built VMPI, which was our own distributed system that spread the map compilation process across many office computers. Today, these kinds of distributed systems run on giant GPU clusters, but at the time we just ran it on all the computers in our office. To deal with how our lighting code was evolving as quickly as our maps were, VMPI also distributed new exe files to everyone's computer too. In retrospect, this was a pretty terrifying security concept, just awfully bad. It's like the stuff of nightmares for IT folks. Because we were sending an arbitrary executable to all of our work PCs, and they would just run it. It was absolute madness. But it worked for us, and it did significantly increase our map iteration speed, and as a result, it ended up being a crucial tool.
Oh, thank goodness. Oh shit, that doesn't look like the right way. Uh-oh.
Mounted gun. The mounted guns were added here to help train the player on the gun's effectiveness against the attack helicopter for the final battle in the reservoir. This was necessary because up to this point, the helicopter was invulnerable to the player's weapons, and we had to give some indication that it could be harmed with larger weaponry. This was only somewhat effective in playtest due to the amount of pressure the player was under at the moment, which led us to developing the particle effects and sounds that would sell to the players that they were really doing damage.
helicopter bombing run. This is another example of us creating movement hazards while driving the airboat. The helicopter attempts to stay in front of the player when dropping bombs, and if the player backtracks, it switches to hovering and turns to attacking the player. In one playtest, a bomb just so happened to drop between the pipe seams, creating a pretty cinematic moment. The playtester had a positive reaction, so the team decided to script it so it happened every time. This process has become part of our organic design process. Every so often, a cool thing randomly happens in a playtest, and we find a way to make it happen more reliably.
I think I'm going to end the stream for right now. I'm going to take a break. If you tuned in tonight, thanks for watching. I'm going to take a break for right now.